Necromunda can be a difficult game to get started with, but the first thing you need to do is pick what gang you actually want to play.
Yeah.
Now, approaching this from the perspective of you're brand new to Necromunda, we've got a listic ranking here for you of what you should and probably should not start with.
Keep in mind, these are just our opinions.
Yes, these are completely objective, factual opinions. However, it is absolutely subjective in the sense of if there is a gang that we say you shouldn't start with, but that's the gang that visually you click with, or lore-wise you click with, or you have a sweet conversion idea for, ignore everything we're saying about this and start with the gang you like the looks of.
Yeah, roll that boulder uphill.
Because that will carry you far farther than trying to pick rules.
Right.
But if you are worried about Necromunda being very complicated, or you have friends who want to play Necromunda but aren't sure about what gang they want, they just know they want to play, this is designed to help us help you nudge them towards maybe one or the other. And starting with number 7, so we're going to go in reverse order of least to best. The gangs you absolutely should not play. Anything that does not have House of in front of it.
Yeah, a House of book should be what you're looking for. If it's anything else with an asterisk, it's probably not where you should start. They have harder to find rules, sometimes like outdated, more complicated rules, like Gene Stealer cults and all that stuff. The other ones, the other 6 that we're going to talk about, are significantly easier to start with and to continue with.
Small exception for the new Ironhead Squat Prospectors.
Yeah.
Because they are new, so their rules are current. They are well updated, and they're actually pretty straightforward and easy to play.
Yeah.
They're slow, but they have good firepower, and they're tough. So little asterisk for them. But in general, you want to stick to the House of books, your main 6 houses. Starting with number 6.
Delok.
Yeah, our everyone's favorite Matrix cosplayers / Cthulhu cultists.
Why not both?
Both, honestly.
Their main playstyle is sneaky and doing stuff outside of the game to get advantage, and that can be difficult for a new player to take advantage of.
It's hard to know what to use when you don't know the game very well.
Right. Like jumping in with the guys that are meant to be tricky and like get around the rules can be too much.
Right. If you play fair with Delok, you will lose.
Oh, yeah.
Like full stop.
Yep.
So if you just put your Delok on the table and try and win a shootout or win a punch out, you're gonna die.
Yeah. There are factions that are better at basically everything except the sneaky play.
Right. So they're difficult to start with.
Yeah.
In addition, their upgrades, their house brutes, and their prospects are weird and hard to use.
Yeah, that's true.
They rely more on the psychic discipline than any other gang.
Which is also just an extra set of rules that you don't necessarily need to learn.
There's a whole slew of rules that come with that.
Yeah.
Both the psychic phase itself, but also bounty hunters and law and misrule, and all of these other things that we'll talk about eventually.
Yep.
In general, unless you really, really, really like the Matrix 3 and want to summon an elder god who's a squid, probably don't want to play Delok.
Yeah.
To start.
Delok is the worst one to start with, other than, again, the worst House of.
Delok might even be harder than some of those, honestly, but at least their rules are current and easy to get, so we're still placing them higher.
Right. Number 5.
Number 5
is one of my favorite factions, which is Khador.
House of Faith.
House of Faith. Did we say House of Shadow?
House of Shadows Delok, but that's implied.
That's implied. House of Faith. They are fanatical murder hobos.
Yep.
And they look real cool and they look fairly simple. The problem is you need a whole bunch of guys on the board.
A lot of guys. They're a horde army.
Yeah, they're a horde army. Their guys all kind of suck individually, so you have to use like your numbers as an advantage, which can be difficult for a newer player to take advantage of. And keeping track of that amount of guys on the board or in a campaign. Like I was having trouble keeping track of my last Khador campaign, and I've been playing for 3 years now.
Yeah, you've played like 8 campaigns.
Yeah.
Over your
so
even someone as seasoned as you had a little trouble.
Yeah.
They've also got some weird rules. Their champion and they have 2 sub factions basically.
Yeah.
They're the only people who do. So there's instant choices to be made that lock you into some very specific things.
That's true.
Their skill selection sucks.
That's true.
And yeah, they're hard to use.
Yeah. And then I will continue with number 4 if we're moving on to that.
Because it's your other
'Cause
favorite.
my other faction that I play, the faction that I started with, is Vanstar. They are, if you know 40k, they're the Tau of Necromunda. They are weak as all get out in melee. They will lose a melee fight, but by darn if they don't win every firefight they get in. Their leaders and champions have really good stats up until they get punched in the face.
Yeah, Vanstar is almost the polar opposite of Khador.
Yeah.
Because whereas Khador are individually weak, kind of suck at everything, but very numerous, Vanstar have very good shooting stats.
Yeah.
They're slow. They have very bad melee stats and very bad melee weapons and very bad melee skills.
Yeah.
But they shoot better than anybody else in the game, bar none. They also tend more towards the elite side of things.
Yeah.
In general, Vanstar will have less on the field.
Which can be easier for a player to keep track of.
Yes, which can be easier, but can also screw you if you build your guys too elite to start. Then you might find yourself with too few guys. Your first campaign game goes poorly, and then you're down the entire campaign because you're desperately trying to claw back. That happens a few times.
Yeah, I've seen it happen.
That's almost a rite of passage for Vanstar. Another rite of passage for Necromunda in general is complaining about Vanstar being too powerful.
Yep.
One of the things that we will advocate for a lot on this channel is use more terrain than you think you need to.
Yeah, I see way too many people putting like 5 or 6 things on the board, like a 40k table, and being like, this is good, not going to work.
Nope, no. Yeah, if you give the Vanstar the grassy knoll, you're going to get JFK'd.
Yeah. Fair.
So they're not bad to start with. They also have their auxiliary rules, which is the Technica, which is basically cybernetic upgrades, are expensive and difficult to use.
Yeah, you basically need to take a serious injury, and then you can give them an upgrade, and it gets rid of the serious injury. So it's like kind of also getting around a downside, which is fine. But
in general, I would say that the gap between 7 and 6 is big. The gap between Delok and Khador is big. The gap between Khador and Vanstar is small, and the gap between Vanstar and everyone else is smaller still.
Yeah.
Vanstar are the first one that I would absolutely not tell a player not to start with.
Yeah.
I would not at all recommend if someone said, I want to play Vanstar, I want to shoot well, then I would go for it.
Yeah.
You have lots of fun. All their models are effective. Their Green Goblin Flyer prospects are very good in game, in addition to being very cool. So by all means, start with Vanstar, but they are a little harder than our top 3.
Yeah.
Which we'll go into our top 3 options now with number 3, Escher. This was a hard one. The 2 and 3 slots were difficult for us because they're very similar. Escher are your junkie chem ladies, basically. It's the all-female gang, which attracts a lot of people for good and terrible reasons. They're all about being really fast and all about poisons. They can't take a punch. They're glass cannons. The idea is to get in, hit very hard, either with ranged or melee, and then get out. And that is they are the first faction that is pretty darn decent both at ranged and melee.
Right, they're decent all-arounders.
They hit very hard in melee with their melee characters. Death Maidens are terrifying in melee and fairly tough compared to everything else.
They have really good skills.
They have very good skills. They're very mobile. They're very fast. You'll get places. Their only downside, part of the reason they're not our number 2, is that their special abilities, the poisons, chems, are expensive as well, and you usually don't get those until like the latter half of a campaign.
Yeah, and they can be a little confusing because it's like you can mix different chems, but they're like one-time use, and then you need like a hanger on in order to really take advantage of them. So yeah, that's the reason they're at 3 instead of 2.
And their glass cannon nature means that if you screw up and don't kill a target in melee, you're not going to survive the clapback.
Right.
If you leave a ganger exposed, they're going to get shot and they're going to die. They don't really have anything to stop them from doing that.
Yeah.
So they're a little harder to play than our number 2, but still a very good choice. Death Maidens, their auxiliary character that comes in their secondary box, are very good. Their other auxiliary character, the Wild Runners, are kind of bad.
Yeah, they're like their draw is the bow, but then the bow isn't terribly strong.
The bow is as good as a bow would be in the 41st millennium, which is not very.
Bringing a bow to a pistol fight.
You can put frag grenades on it, but then it'll blow you up too.
Yeah.
The bigger draw about the ladies with bows is that they can bring cat friends, and the cat friends are far more useful than the ladies with bows.
Yeah. Number 2 is the faction that you're going to be playing next.
Yeah,
you should talk about that.
Number 2 is Orlok, the House of Iron. Orlok are they're kind of they look like bikers or mechanics. I call them weaponized teamsters, which I don't think matters to anybody anymore.
Nope.
But basically, they're your tough blue collar worker guys.
Yeah.
They own all the roads in Necromunda, and they're all about running guns and controlling the wastes. They're the most all-arounder faction because they don't hit quite as hard as Escher, but they're a lot more durable.
Yeah.
Your leader as Orlok is the only default leader who starts with 3 wounds.
Yep.
Which is a much bigger deal in Necromunda than 40k.
Then it sounds like, yeah.
The gap between 1 wound and 2 wound is massive. The gap between 2 and 3 wounds is massive. Because very often you'll be doing 1 damage at a time to things. So their lead is very tough. They just have good all-around firepower, mid-range. It's not super long range, but they also punch pretty decently.
Yep.
Not harder than our number 1, but pretty darn hard.
Yeah.
And their unique skill set, which is the legendary names, is very easy to use. Because you just assign a legendary name to a guy, and it can do something like, you can't shoot this guy without passing a willpower test. This guy gets 1 very powerful punch.
I do like 1 punch.
1 punch is hilarious. Punched at strength 8, no save, 2 damage. They're just all-arounder. Their only downside is that you will generally lose a fight to somebody who's specialized in something if they fight you on those terms. You fight Vanstar in range, you're going to lose. You fight Escher in speed, you're going to lose. You fight our number 1, Goliath, in melee, you're going to lose. So you're not quite as good at any one thing, but you can do everything pretty darn well.
Yeah, which is fantastic for a new player.
Yeah, they're one of my go-to recommendations for new players. But our actual go-to recommendation for new players from a rules perspective is
Goliath.
House of Chains.
They are the stat line. Their thing is their stat line.
Absolute units.
They have an extra strength above every other gang.
Strength 4 instead of strength 3.
Yep. They have an extra toughness above every other gang except for
Squats,
which we mentioned earlier. They are, which it can be very difficult for new players, but they are very customizable.
Yes.
And if you want to, you don't have to use those rules. But if you do want to, it's not difficult to understand. It's not as easy as legendary names.
No.
Legendary names are just like
pick one, slap it on, you're done.
Sticker on this guy. He has an ability now.
Yeah.
But they are the most forgiving when it comes to making mistakes. They hit like absolute trucks in melee and range.
So let's put this in perspective to people who maybe have not played Necromunda at all. When you hit somebody with an attack, that attack has a strength value. For a gun, it's assigned to the gun. For a melee weapon, it's usually your strength, especially at gang creation. Goliaths, being toughness 4, most starting guns and starting gangers are strength 3.
Right.
So when the strength is lower than the toughness, you have to roll a 5 or up.
To wound.
So at the start of most campaigns, except with your heaviest hitters, you're going to be wounding Goliaths only a third of the time, as opposed to half the time for everybody else. And then you flip that around, when Goliath get into punch-in mode, they've got strength 4, and all the other gangs, except for squats, have toughness 3. So they're wounding
on 3s.
On 3s instead of 4s. So they're tougher, and they punch better. So it's kind of a double win there. Yeah. It's more forgiving for both of those reasons.
They're still pretty slow.
They are slow, but not slower than Vanstar.
Not slower than Vanstar. They're the same speed as Vanstar, and again, with their customization stuff, you can increase that. But that's really their only downside.
They're a short range in general.
Yeah.
They're the big muscly forge working guys. Yeah. So they like to get into melee, but they have very powerful short range shooting.
Yeah.
They are not slouches.
Excuse me. They also have some high risk long range shooting with bolters and heavy bolters.
Yes.
Because they're just their regular gangers have access to bolters.
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
Yeah, bolters are very good. Bolters in Necromunda are the thing you want, not the baseline like 40k.
Yeah.
You know, someone with a bolter is terrifying.
These are the guys that live under the city that that the other people live in, and so they're kind of scrounging for scraps. So a bolter is like the best thing they've ever seen.
One thing about Goliath that we were re-recording this, and that we forgot to mention last time, is they also have the single best cool stat.
Oh yeah.
Of any starting gang.
Yeah. which is actually surprisingly important.
So your cool stat is when things go south, which in Necromunda they always do. Basically, when you start losing more guys, you have to make cool checks to not run away, to not flee for various things. Goliath have a cool of 6 on their basic guys.
Yeah, I think their worst cool is 6.
Yeah,
their leaders are like 4.
And on a cool check is you roll 2d6 and you have to beat or meet. So on 2d6 you have to beat or meet 6. That's easy. That's more than statistical. A 7 is statistical, and your leader's a 4. Like, unless you roll double 1s, you're fine.
Yeah.
That keeps them in, so they're tougher. They're also mentally tougher, so they stay in the fight longer, even when you do lose guys.
Yeah.
Which
Again,
is
more forgiving than most other factions.
very handy. Their only big downside for us is the models. Because you and I don't particularly care for roided out Zerkers.
Yeah. If you want a faction full of Banes from Batman, by all means. But we don't in particular.
They're growing on me.
Yeah?
I don't know why.
Interesting.
I've been watching a lot of videos online lately, and just big, huge, oiled up muscle men are just really getting to me now, and I don't know why.
Okay.
No,
okay,
but
we'll talk about that.
Yeah. In seriousness, though, they have a very distinct aesthetic.
Yeah.
And the chainsaw mohawks are so cool.
They are.
The idea of headbutting somebody with your chainsaw mohawk is...
they should get like an AP on there.
They should get a...
attacks.
You know what? That's the +1 strength.
Yeah.
That's
true.
Yeah.
It's just from that.
Yeah. Every attack with a headbutt with a Goliath is a headbutt.
Yeah.
It's just whether or not you model it like that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But in general, if you're just looking for something to start that will let you start the game fairly easily, Goliath are probably your best bet.
Yeah.
You really can't go wrong with Orlok and Escher and Vanstar. Vanstar are maybe a little tougher because they do have to play the don't touch me, I'm scared game. When you start getting into Khador and especially Delak, approach with caution. And
it's doable, but it's difficult.
And the gangs above that, the 7th place gangs, we're not even really saying they're harder to play in game. It's just usually getting their rules and models is a pain in the butt and not worth it.
Yeah.
I won't say not worth it, because it very often is worth it. But it's a pain in the butt. And you're often playing something very specialized, and you really want to know what you're doing before you jump into something and go, oh, this is overwhelming. Because that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
I started with Outcasts, who are the single worst gang to start with.
Yeah.
Bar none.
Very, very, very bottom of the list.
Yeah. Amazingly fun gang, but you can do literally anything, which is paralyzing.
Yeah.
But in general, if you're confused about what to start with and you just know you want to play Necromunda, pick up some Goliath, some Orlok, some Escher. Can't go wrong with those 3, absolutely.
Yeah.
Vanstar close 4th.
Yeah. And then if you want, if the Matrix was really cool and you feel like having a challenge, then go for it.
If you just really want to paint some bald dudes in trench coats, that's going to carry you far. You can learn to love anything, which is what we like about Necromunda.
That's true.
That's it from us this time. Next time, we're going to start the very challenging process of actually getting into this darn game.
Yeah, it's... I think we should, in the next video, we should have a little counter of, like, reasons Necromunda annoys us, even though we love it.
Stay tuned next time for our abusive relationship with Necromunda.
Yeah.
For this episode, I've been Josh.
And I've been Mitchell.
We'll see you next time on the Necromundown.